So instead of making a normal video about getting better at League, I figure I'd try something new. With Worlds coming around, which is the most exciting League event of all year, of every year, why not make it about just that? And there's a lot of information that gets piled into that tournament because of so much international competition, a build-up of a year funneled into one tournament, and it can be a little confusing. So what I want to do is make a little bit of a series of introduction to certain picks that I think will be very contested and very crucial to the outcome of these games. Now, what I'm going to do is two picks for every role. So two picks in the top lane that I think are going to be very important. Same with the jungle, mid lane, AD carry, and support, and make a video about each one, highlighting the strengths, the weaknesses, what teams play it, what teams don't, how to beat that kind of champion, what's built around it, all sorts of things like that. So for this one, I figured I'd start off simply with Elise. Elise is a highly contested jungler right now after they changed the little tweak that made it so that the cocoon started out at 1.6 seconds stun as opposed to, I believe it was 1. And ever since then, the champion has been soaring through competition. Now, every single team going into Worlds has played Elise except CLG. And AHQ actually. I have struggled to find the game where AHQ played it because they qualified a little bit earlier, especially because they qualified previous to the patches where Elise was buffed, so they didn't really have to show too much of that. And Mountain, the jungler from AHQ, isn't particularly known for his Elise, more so on the Rex side. CLG, on the other hand, really likes more team fighting champions, as you saw during the playoffs, where they really prioritized Gragas and the Echo, which were the really two go-to picks for them. Every other team, though, has played Elise recently with the changes, and all of them see success with it. So it's a very strong pick. Now, what exactly makes Elise such a powerful pick? Well, unlike other junglers right now that can be played kind of poorly and you can still get away with a lot of things, such as, say, Gragas. You don't need to hit that many great ultis. If you're playing with a Yasuo comp, you kind of just chuck it. If it hits somebody, it hits and Yasuo follows up. Not really a lot of thought process behind that. Going for the flash body slam engage isn't really necessary because more often than not, you can just use your body slam, which has a really large area of effect to hit, to just CC targets that are important, and it's really not that hard to have a good impact on the team fight. Same with a champion like Echo. The parallel convergence, which is a stun, is a little bit difficult to line up, but besides that, you can do a lot of damage just by auto attacking, being very tanky, utilizing your ultimate when you make a mistake, and getting that passive slow, which can be really deadly in a team fight if you can proc it on multiple people or on multiple people more than once. So those champions have a large a large room for error, unlike Elise. And similar with Rexa, which I forgot to mention, she's also knock up pretty easy, and then you just right click and spam abilities, right click and do it again, and burrow. It even has a little timer where it tells you when you can burrow, so it's a lot simpler. A champion like Elise, on the other hand, if you start missing cocoons, if your ganks are missing cocoons, then you are going to be in a lot of trouble in making that champion work. If you can't repel out of certain skill shots or reposition yourself in a team fight properly, you're going to get caught out a lot, you're going to die a lot, and you're going to have very little impact on the game. Because if you fall behind on that champion, you don't do much, especially if you're a little bit tilted, not hitting many cocoons. Now, that is a big thing about this champion. The more you play this champion, the better you become, and the more you separate yourselves from the really average Elises and become a great Elise that is deadly, that is ban worthy. The same can kind of go for the other champions, but you don't really have to do that, to be honest. You don't have to be a fantastic Gragas to have a huge effect on him, especially if you pick him in the right circumstances with the right team comp versus the right team comp. Picking a Yasuo comp with Gragas versus poke comp that has no mobility is pretty easy. You don't really need a lot of skill to pull that off. So Elise, unlike all those other champions, you have to be on point with her. So it's a champion that players will only pick and succeed with if they have no nerves. If you can play your game, if you're a mechanically sound player and can really spam all those abilities, because there's a lot of things to keep track of. You got to keep in mind the cooldowns of your other form while you're switching. You need to remember that when you are in human form, you throw out your stun, your W, your Q, you transform, you go Q, W, then repel, all sorts of things. Use flash, use your smite. It's a lot of buttons to press at once in a very quick succession, which can be a little bit daunting as opposed to Gragas or Echo, which is, WE kind of thing. So she's very mechanically intense, and players that might be a little bit nervous will probably shy away from her, but the ones that don't will find a lot of success in her. And the reason being is that she has a lot of great early wave clear, or not wave clear, but jungle clear. So she has an easy time doing both a double jungle or jungling by herself. Since most people rune on her attack speed, starting at double golems is really efficient because you get the attack speed with your W, can stun the monsters quite often, tank it with your little spiderlings, and take very little damage. On top of that, she has a very strong level 3. So she has a stun, so if you try to invade on her, you can get caught out because she can chase you down very easily with both repel, the little movement speed kind of thrust with her Q in spider form, as well as the refresh on the cooldown, red buff, blue smite kind of thing. So she's a really strong early game, but not so much for the dueling. The reason she's really sought after is because she is the best early game jungler in applying pressure, winning 2v2s, and most importantly, tower dives. That is her strength. Now, the reason being is that she offers percentage damage, she is ranged, so it's a lot easier to set up a tower dive if you're a ranged champion because you can also hit them from afar, throw out your spells, don't take the tower aggro, whittle them down, and then wait for your next rotation and do it again. And it becomes super easy to do it because she, similar to what Maokai does in dodging turret aggro with his Twisted Advance, in which he becomes untargetable, Elise does the same thing. So the top laner the Elise can start the tower dive, throws it from afar, tanks 1, 2 tower shots, repels it out, then the top laner or whoever else is helping dive can tank a little, Elise drops down, and then you can continue the tower dive. So she has a lot more tools for pulling that kind of thing off, especially in the very early game. You can see Elise's go for a tower dive on an almost 80% life target to 0 at level 3 kind of thing. So she's really strong in that department. But the thing about her is that she really needs to get going. Like, this is a champion that can only do that if the team is built around her. So what I mean by that is that when you pick an Elise, you kind of already tell yourself, you kind of tell the other team and you tell your team, we're going to be going for the early game. And we're going to be fighting a lot and we're going to be tower diving a lot. So we're going to need very aggressive lanes. Lanes that can bully, put a lot of harass, and can facilitate in a tower dive. So for instance, if you're playing against a Maokai top, the other team for some reason picked the Maokai. Maokai, a very contested pick, particularly SKT. They've won, I believe, 24 games in a row with Maokai in their LCK region, so could pick Maokai. The other team has an Elise. You're not going to want to take a Shen with that Elise if you want to punish the Maokai. That's not really going to get anything. There's not enough damage to actually kill that Maokai almost any stage of the game, to be honest. Maokai very tanky, can itemize only one source of that one resistance, get to Spectre's Cowl, all of a sudden you can't tower dive him anymore. Not enough damage between the Shen and the Elise. Instead, pick something like an Olaf, pick something like a Gnar. All of a sudden, you got yourself quite a punch in order to dive with a little bit more CC, and it's pretty easy to get out of the tower aggro with the untargetability with the repel from Elise or the Ragnarok from Olaf. So picking champions that can really bully and facilitate in dives is something that's really important for Elise. For the mid laner, it doesn't really matter all that much until you pick things that are kind of like a Diana kind of thing or a Yasuo, so you don't have a knockup. It's kind of an awkward situation. Yasuo, it's kind of hard to bully mages that early on. So picks like that, kind of shy away from the Elise composition and can really slow down the early game for that champion. So I think that teams that want to play this will really have to be on their game in terms of the drafting. So that'll come down to the coach to determine, are my players, mentally sound to pull off Elise in the world stage? We flew to Paris all the way out here. My players, perfectly mentally. So that's something that's you have to keep in mind. And if you don't, well, the Elise kind of goes to waste. she's not a champion that scales very hard into the late game. She can offer good damage to peel. So for instance, if one of the juggernauts, which are really common coming up in this patch, is trying to dive an AD carry, Elise can provide some pretty decent peel because she does decent damage to him with the percentage damage. Juggernauts have a lot of life. Good CC, most likely will force either Merc Tread purchases, cleanses, QSSs, crucibles from the enemy team, which can be really beneficial if you have the right composition to abuse somebody rushing, that kind of thing. And but besides that, she's just not that great for anything else. Like if the teams are really focused on the team fighting, the players that picked the Gragases, the Evelyns, the Echoes, and God knows what other junglers are going to be picking, are going to have a much easier time impacting the game outside of the laning phase, which is where Elise really wants to get her lead going. She's kind of a laning champion. So a team, for instance, like Cloud9, who a lot of time picks for the lane. So they have really strong laners with the Karma, with the Tristana, with the Ari, that kind of thing can really work with the Elise in terms of just going into that lets Elise go into the enemy jungle and then loop from behind, go for a tower dive, and really be effective. Another another positive about Elise is the fact that she's an AP jungler, unlike Lee Sin, unlike Rek'Sai, and maybe even a Vi, who knows if we might see Vi, is the fact that because she's AP, she can allow your team to get more physical damage power picks. So some of those picks that are going around right now are the Juggernauts, of course. Fiora, Darius, Gangplank, maybe Garen, the Olaf, maybe Riven as well. Having Elise on your team really makes it so that you have a really good synergy between the Elise and that champion. Dual kinds of damage. You got physical, you got magic, lots of burst, lots of CC. It's really easy for Elise to help those lanes out, which are the ones that you want to snowball. A good example of somebody that really took advantage of that was when EDG qualified for Worlds by, I forget the team that they beat, but the composition that they ran, I do not, and it was Darius top with Elise in the jungle, Gangplank middle. Now, first thing you think, Gangplank and Darius on one team, that is an overload of physical damage already. Well, Gangplank has quite a bit of magic damage with his ultimate, some true damage as well, and I believe Darius is still true damage. And what they did was they put the AD carry on Kog'Maw, so that Kog'Maw and Elise, being both percent magic damage, would provide enough magic damage that the enemy team could not just itemize one resistance and would still create a good team composition with CC, damage, peel, and that's kind of the thing that you want to be looking for when you pick a champion like Elise. You facilitate other picks that might be beneficial for the team composition, but wouldn't necessarily work without enough magic damage. So Corki and Elise, you pick a Corki and Elise, and then you go full physical damage and everything else, can be a really solid composition. Especially with the rise of what we saw from CLG, the Yasuo top, maybe we see some Gangplank top, some Riven, all that kind of stuff would really be complemented well by a pick like Elise. So when you pick her, you don't really give all much away about what you're going to be going for your team composition, just that you can pick that kind of stuff. Otherwise, we might see like a full AP comp. She deals out enough damage, can be a good tank. And with a pick like Kog'Maw, which is a very common pick with Elise, we see teams go with like a Maokai, Elise, Azir, Kog'Maw, and like a Janna kind of thing. Even though it's mostly magic damage, the pick still complements it in terms of dealing percent damage and having good CC to protect picks. Those are really the strengths of the champion. And for the weaknesses, though, if she doesn't get going, she does get outscaled, as I mentioned. And one of the things that I really want to see, because I'm a huge fan of this play, is Bengi from SKT playing Nunu. Now, if you remember seeing him play Nunu, this guy was just counter jungling beyond belief, making the other jungler's life a complete nightmare. So teams that play against Elise, because the teams that pick that would really focus the early game strategy around this champion, it is wise to pick a strategy that focuses on shutting down that champion. So creating instances of very safe play, picking really safe picks that are kind of difficult to tower dive, such as a Janna and a Azir that can really never get pushed in, or maybe even like a really hyper tanky top laner. If you're protected by a pick like an Olaf as well, it can be a little bit tough to dive him. And the Nunu from the jungle. Obviously, not many teams are going to pick Nunu, but one that will definitely have it in its arsenal is SKT. And that pick can really just keep tabs on Elise throughout the entire game, and it'll just nullify the entire champion. So what the Nunu pick does, and it can be done on other champions as well, obviously Nunu's a better one, but if one chooses to adopt the style of simply going for counter jungling and denying the other jungler, both junglers' total gold goes down, their pressure on the lanes goes down, and just they both nullify each other. And turns out that Nunu is the one that's going to be the most useful out of all, with huge base values on his ultimate, fantastic utility with the Blood Bowl and the Snowball, really tanky, one of the tankiest junglers without any items. He can really wreak havoc and make the other jungler's life a complete misery and really shut down the strategy. So counter jungling can be super effective against his champion, especially if you reach towards the mid game and the team with the Elise doesn't have a good lead. She's gonna have a hard time getting in, dishing out enough damage. Being the front line to throw out those cocoons is gonna be a lot harder when you can't tank it. Now, what I want to see from this is that the teams that play against it are obviously going to be either meeting it with complete passiveness, all right, we're just going to lane swap, team fight kind of thing, or complete aggression. So just a lot more tower dives, a lot more counter jungling, and just really taking it to the horns, grabbing it by the horns. That's the correct saying, actually. And if you remember when there was a very contested pick at MSI, the last international tournament that we had, it was Rek'Sai, and every single team that got Rek'Sai was just able to get kills left, right, and center. You know, Rek'Sais would be going crazy with kills everywhere they went, which is tower dive, gank here, skirmish here, 1v2 here, all sorts of things with that champion. And it's kind of what I'm hoping to see from this pick again at Worlds. And I think that even CLG will also start playing it as well, maybe even AHQ. And it's just going to create a lot of blood, to be honest, and it's really exciting to watch that kind of play, especially because from the spectator point of view, it's really easy to tell which is a good Elise and which one is not. If if you, the viewer out there, is somebody who plays Elise, you can really tell how much of an impact you have in the game based on how many cocoons you hit. So find yourself, take a game or two, and actually write down the amount of cocoons that you're hitting. Keep a track of it, watch the replay kind of thing, and you're going to find that in the games that you hit almost all of your cocoons, they feel extremely easy. It is a fantastic feeling. The game goes very smoothly, and you most likely would have won. In the games that you're missing quite a bit, that you fail some ganks because you don't hit the cocoon, and you tell yourself, if I just hit that, I would have won that. Oh, if I just switch my forms faster and I would have hit that cocoon, I would have won. So keep track of that, and then you realize just how powerful the champion can be in the right hands, and even more so when teams are going to orchestrate four-man tower dives, such as the ones we saw in EDG Game 1 versus Snake, which was fantastic to see pulled off with the Rek'Sai. Elise can provide the exact same utility and ability to create a play like that, especially with the fact that you can actually teleport to an Elise Spiderling. So anytime that she's fighting, you can actually have a top laner just TP right onto her, similar to how a top laner can TP to the Rek'Sai tunnel. You can TP to the Spiderling, set up a really nice play, and it just gets that much deadlier. I hope this video was enjoyable and really brought some new points to life, and I'll be most likely making another one very soon about other picks. And for now, I have not revealed the picks that I think will be very crucial for the tournament. And if you have any that you'd really think and have a fantastic argument as to why they should be in the video, then feel free to let me know.